Imagine walking into a vast, ancient cathedral. Sunlight streams through stained glass, painting the stone floor in colors that seem almost alive. You're surrounded by towering arches, intricate carvings, and a silence so profound it feels sacred. Then, from the far end of the nave, you hear it, a whisper, soft but unmistakable, traveling clearly across the immense space, as if the speaker were standing right beside you. It's not a trick or an illusion, it's architecture. This breathtaking experience is the work of master builders, the architects of silence, who, centuries ago, learned to weave sound itself into the very fabric of their designs. Today, we're setting out on a journey to explore one of history's most captivating hidden arts, how sacred spaces were intentionally crafted not just to be seen, but to be heard. From the echoing chambers of prehistoric temples to the soaring vaults of Gothic cathedrals, we'll uncover how these ancient builders embedded astonishing acoustic principles into stone, wood, and space. They understood something we're only now fully appreciating with modern science, that sound can shape emotion, deepen prayer, and even alter consciousness. These weren't just places of worship, they were instruments carefully tuned to elevate the human spirit. Join me as we step into the world of the architects of silence. Together, we'll wander through history's most enigmatic structures, decode the secrets behind their enduring power, and learn how the marriage of spirituality and science gave rise to spaces where whispers travel across time itself. By the end of our exploration, you won't just see these sacred sites differently, you'll hear them in a whole new way. Long before the first blueprint was ever drawn or the first acoustic equation written, our ancestors were already listening. They noticed how a shout could bounce off a canyon wall, how a whisper might curl through a seaside cave, and how certain frequencies seemed to hang in the air inside a narrow stone passage. These weren't just curiosities, they were clues. To ancient spiritual seekers, these sonic phenomena felt less like accidents of nature and more like messages. They hinted that the very fabric of the world could be shaped to carry meaning, to elevate a human voice into something divine. This was the dawn of sacred acoustics, a time when intuition and observation began their slow dance with architecture. Consider the oracle at Delphi in ancient Greece. Pilgrims would travel for days to ask questions of the Pythia, the priestess who channeled the god Apollo. She would deliver her prophecies from a small chamber deep within the temple, often in a trance-like state. Historians and archaeologists now believe the location was far from arbitrary. The temple was built directly over a geological fault line, from which ethylene gas known to induce altered states of consciousness would seep from the rock. But there was likely an auditory component too. The chamber's peculiar shape and stone construction may have subtly altered her voice, lending it an echoing, otherworldly quality that mesmerized those who heard it. The sound itself became part of the ritual, a veil between the mortal and the divine. Similarly, in the vast columned halls of Egyptian temples like Karnak, priests understood the power of resonance. When they chanted the names of the gods or recited sacred texts, the sound didn't just disappear. It was caught and amplified by the massive, closely spaced stone pillars and the high, flat ceilings. The low, rhythmic drone of their voices would build upon itself, creating a palpable vibration that worshippers could feel in their chests as much as hear with their ears. This wasn't merely a ceremony, it was a full-body experience engineered by the space itself. The architecture transformed human speech into a physical force, reinforcing the idea that words had the power to create and sustain the universe. These early pioneers were operating without textbooks or decibel meters. They were masters of empirical design, learning through generations of trial and error. A builder might notice that a rounded wall produced a clearer echo than a flat one, or that a particular type of stone made a chant sound richer. This knowledge was then passed down, often as a sacred tradition among guilds of masons and priests. They were the first true acoustic architects, though they would never have used the term. Their palette was geometry, their materials were earth and stone, and their canvas was silence. They sought to sculpt that silence, to carve out pockets within it where sound could behave in miraculous ways. This pursuit was always about more than mere audibility or volume. The goal was transformation. By manipulating sound waves, these ancient designers were also manipulating human perception. A prolonged reverberation could make a simple melody feel eternal. A perfectly focused whisper, seeming to come from nowhere, could feel like the voice of a spirit. They discovered that acoustics could induce awe, focus concentration, and even facilitate trance states. The architecture became an active participant in the ritual, a silent partner in the quest for transcendence. It was a fusion of spiritual yearning and nascent science, laying a foundation so profound that we are still unraveling its secrets thousands of years later. Deep beneath the sun-baked earth of modern-day Malta lies a labyrinth that defies simple explanation. This is the Hypogeum of Saflini, a sprawling underground complex carved from solid limestone over 5,000 years ago. It's a place of profound silence and shadow, a necropolis where the dead were laid to rest in chambers stacked 3 stories deep, but to call it merely a burial site is to miss its deepest mystery. Step inside one particular room, known today as the Oracle Chamber, and speak in a low voice. You won't just hear your own words, you'll feel them. The sound doesn't just echo, it transforms, morphing into a deep, resonant tone that seems to hum from the very stone around you, vibrating through your bones. It's an experience so unsettling and powerful that for decades, many believed it had to be an accidental byproduct of the cave's formation. We now know it was anything but. The architects of the Hypogeum were master sculptors of both stone and sound. They didn't just hollow out caves, they carefully shaped the walls and ceilings into precise, curved forms that function as perfect acoustic amplifiers. In the Oracle Chamber, a low chant or a sharp clap is captured and amplified at a specific frequency, a deep rumble around 110 Hz. This is the threshold of infrasound, frequencies so low they are felt more than heard. Modern research has shown that exposure to sound at this specific frequency can have a profound psychological impact, triggering feelings of awe, unease, or even trance-like states. It can create visual distortions, a sense of presence, or the chilling feeling that the sound is coming from inside your own head. Is it any wonder that this chamber was likely the heart of sacred rituals, a place where a shaman's voice could become the disembodied voice of a spirit or god? This acoustic manipulation wasn't confined to one room. The entire complex is a carefully engineered soundscape. A whisper spoken softly in one of the smaller, oval burial chambers can be heard with startling clarity in another part of the labyrinth, the architecture carrying the message around corners and through stone as if by magic. This is achieved through the creation of standing waves, where sound waves reflecting off the precisely angled walls reinforce each other, allowing them to travel much farther than they normally would without losing their intelligibility. The builders even created what experts call resonant niches, small alcoves carved at strategic points that act like acoustic lenses, focusing and directing sound in specific ways. This indicates a level of planning and understanding that is simply astonishing for a prehistoric culture. What's truly staggering is that these Neolithic builders achieved all of this without any of our modern instruments. Their tools were observation, intuition, and generations of accumulated knowledge. They learned how different shapes and surfaces altered sound through patient experimentation, listening to the way noise behaved in natural caves, and then replicating and refining those effects in their own constructions. The Hypogeum stands as a monumental testament to this forgotten science. It proves that the drive to harness the power of sound, to shape our environment in order to shape our experience, is not a modern luxury but a fundamental part of human ingenuity. Long before the Great Pyramids or Stonehenge, people were already mastering the invisible art of acoustics, using it to bridge the gap between the world of the living and the world of the unseen. While the Hypogeum offers a glimpse into the intuitive, almost mystical origins of sacred sound, the ancient Greeks approached the challenge with a different kind of genius, one rooted in geometry, mathematics, and a profound understanding of the physical world. Journey to the serene Peloponnese Peninsula, and you'll find their masterpiece standing in a pine-scented valley, the Theatre of Epidorus, constructed in the 4th century B.C. Its majesty is undeniable. 55 rows of pristine limestone seats rise in a perfect semicircle, cradling the orchestra below, but its true wonder is revealed not through sight but through sound. From the very back row, nearly 200 feet away and 100 feet up, you can hear the unmistakable rip of a piece of paper on the stage. You can hear a match being struck. You can, as the stories say, hear a pin drop. This is not a gentle amplification. It is acoustic clarity so precise it feels like a supernatural phenomenon. For centuries, this incredible auditory feat was chalked up to legend or favorable winds. Modern acoustic engineers, armed with sophisticated equipment, have now decoded its secrets, and the reality is even more impressive than the myth. The design is a perfect storm of acoustic principles working in harmonious concert. The steep slope of the seating, the koilon, acts as a massive natural sound filter. The stepped rows of seats themselves function like a giant diffraction grating, breaking up and scattering sound waves that would otherwise be lost to the sky, channeling them upward instead of letting them escape. This prevents the sound from becoming a muddled echo and instead pushes it clearly to the top. Even the material itself plays a crucial role. The porous limestone of the benches absorbs low-frequency background noise, the rustle of the crowd, the hum of the wind, while reflecting the higher frequencies of the human voice, allowing every consonant and vowel to travel with stunning intelligibility. But this was far more than an ancient concert hall. Epidorus was the sanctuary of Asclepius, the god of medicine, and it was part of a larger healing complex. The performances held here, tragedies and comedies, were not mere entertainment. They were a form of psychotherapy, a crucial part of the healing ritual. The Greeks believed in catharsis, the purging of pity and fear through the intense emotional experience of drama. The architects understood that for this catharsis to work, every single person in the audience, regardless of their social status or seat location, had to be fully immersed. They had to hear every whispered confession, every anguished cry, and every chorus's warning as if it were meant for their ears alone. The sound quality was therefore not a luxury, it was the very mechanism of healing. The precision of the acoustics ensured that the emotional and spiritual message was delivered with maximum impact, restoring harmony to the mind and body by first engaging the soul. This represents a monumental leap in intentional design, where the builders of the Hypogeum sculpted for mystery and altered states, the Greeks engineered for clarity and emotional transmission. They applied mathematical ratios and a deep understanding of harmonic scales to their architecture, treating the space as a giant instrument to be tuned. The Theatre of Epidorus stands as a powerful testament to this philosophy, demonstrating that by the classical period, acoustics had been elevated from an observed natural phenomenon to a high art form, a science of the soul perfectly engineered in stone. But the true magic of these ancient spaces wasn't just in their grand shapes and sweeping curves. It was in the very substance they were made from. The architects of silence understood that geometry was only half the equation. The other half was resonance, and that was dictated by a careful, intentional selection of materials. They weren't just building with stone and wood, they were composing with them, choosing each element for its unique acoustic voice, turning the entire structure into a massive, carefully tuned instrument. Consider the great Gothic cathedrals of Europe, like Chartres or Notre Dame. Their immense, awe-inspiring interiors weren't carved from just any rock. They were built primarily with limestone. This wasn't a random choice based solely on availability. Limestone has a very particular sonic personality. It's a relatively porous and soft stone, which means it acts as a natural acoustic filter. It absorbs the sharper, high-frequency sounds, the harsh consonants, the rustle of clothing, the distracting noise of the outside world. But it powerfully reflects the lower frequencies. This is why the deep, resonant tones of Gregorian chant or the rich hum of a pipe organ don't just fill these spaces, they linger and blend within them. The limestone wraps the sound in a warm, enveloping blanket of reverberation, creating that famous ethereal atmosphere that feels both immense and intimate. It's a sound that encourages quiet contemplation, making the human voice part of a continuous, heavenly chorus. Now, travel back to the ancient world of Greece and Rome, and you encounter a completely different sonic palette, achieved through a different material, marble. Polished marble is incredibly dense and rigid with a smooth, reflective surface. Unlike absorptive limestone, marble acts like an acoustic mirror. It reflects sound waves with incredible efficiency and clarity, with very little absorption or distortion. In a temple like the Parthenon, this created a bright, articulate acoustic environment. A speaker's voice or the notes of a lyre would be projected with precision, every syllable and every musical note remaining distinct and intelligible. This clarity was essential for the orations, philosophical debates, and complex musical compositions that were central to classical life. The marble ensured that the message, whether from a statesman or a priest, was delivered with power and unmistakable clarity, its intellectual meaning preserved. In the East, a different spiritual philosophy gave rise to a different acoustic goal, and thus a different material choice, wood. In Japanese Zen Buddhist temples, for instance, the intention is not to amplify sound to the heavens or project a voice to a crowd. The goal is inner stillness. The architecture is designed to create pockets of profound silence, and wood is the perfect medium for this. Materials like cedar and cypress, along with rice paper screens and tatami mat flooring, are naturally absorptive. They soak up sound waves, dampening reverberation and eliminating echo. The result is an acoustic environment of incredible quiet and intimacy, where the slightest natural sound, the scratch of a calligraphy brush, the ring of a meditation bell, the rustle of a robe becomes a focal point for mindfulness. The wood creates a soft, muted soundscape that doesn't distract but instead turns attention inward, fostering the deep introspection that is the heart of the practice. This deep knowledge of material science wasn't written down in formal manuals. It was a living tradition passed from master builders to their apprentices over centuries. They learned through hands-on experience that a vault made of a certain sandstone would sing, while a wall of granite would create a dead spot. They understood that the density, porosity, and even the grain of the material would fundamentally shape the soul of the space. By selecting one stone over another, or choosing intricate wooden latticework instead of solid plaster, these architects were doing far more than decorating. They were composing the very air itself, conducting an invisible orchestra of resonance and silence that continues to play its timeless music for anyone who steps inside and listens. This profound understanding of materials was only one piece of the puzzle. To truly command sound, the master builders needed a universal language, a set of rules that could translate their auditory visions into stone and mortar. They found this language not in a laboratory, but in the cosmos itself, in the perfect, repeating patterns they observed in nature. The spiral of a nautilus shell, the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower, the branching of a tree. They believed these patterns were the signature of the divine, a sacred geometry that held the key to harmony in all things, including sound. This wasn't abstract mysticism, it was a practical design code. By embedding these ratios into their buildings, they were essentially writing a musical score for the space itself, ensuring that every note and every whisper would resonate in perfect, preordained harmony. The most famous of these principles is the golden ratio, often represented by the Greek letter phi, approximately 1.618. This irrational number appears throughout nature and was revered as the key to aesthetically perfect proportions. For an acoustic architect, phi was far more than a pretty number. It became the fundamental blueprint for room dimensions, a space built with a length, width, and height in a ratio based on phi avoids the acoustic problems of a perfect cube, which can create chaotic, booming standing waves. Instead, these irrational ratios help to distribute sound waves more evenly throughout a room, preventing harsh echoes and dead spots while promoting a smooth, blended reverberation. It's the difference between the clean, clear ring of a finely tuned bell and the discordant clang of a struck piece of metal. The space itself becomes the bell, tuned to a celestial frequency. We can see this divine mathematics etched into the very stones of Chartres Cathedral. The entire layout is a complex web of geometric relationships. The width of the nave relates to the height of the vaults through harmonic ratios. The dimensions of the chapels circling the choir correspond to the intervals of a musical scale. The architects didn't just want the space to look magnificent, they wanted it to sound a specific way. When a choir sang a Gregorian chant, whose notes are based on these same natural harmonic series, the geometry of the cathedral would physically reinforce those frequencies. The sound waves would bounce and interact in a way that caused the music to swell, not with noise, but with a cohesive, ethereal clarity that felt less like a human performance and more like the voices of angels emanating from the walls. The building was an active participant in the liturgy, an instrument played by the faithful. This is why these sacred spaces are overwhelmingly composed of curves and circles, from the vast domes of Byzantine churches to the arched vaults of Gothic naves. Sharp corners and flat, parallel walls are the enemy of good acoustics. They trap sound, creating muddy echoes and unpredictable hotspots. A curve, by contrast, is nature's perfect diffuser. It scatters sound waves gently, guiding them on a flowing path around the space, allowing them to blend and merge seamlessly. A whisper spoken beneath a dome is carried upward and outward, distributed evenly to all who stand below. This principle transforms the entire building into a dynamic soundscape, where acoustics are not a static phenomenon but a living, breathing presence that moves and evolves within the sacred geometry. The marriage of math and mysticism was therefore absolute. Every arch was both a structural marvel and an acoustic waveguide. Every column served to hold up the roof while also breaking up sound waves to prevent dissonance. This embodied the core medieval belief that beauty and function were not separate pursuits but two expressions of the same divine truth, that to build for God was to build with perfect harmony, making the silence itself speak of a higher order. If the ancient Greeks sought clarity and the Romans power, then the Gothic architects of medieval Europe pursued something entirely different: transcendence. They didn't just want you to hear the service, they wanted you to be consumed by it, to feel utterly enveloped in a sonic manifestation of the divine. This ambition gave birth to an architectural revolution, one defined by a seemingly impossible desire to build heaven on earth and to make it sing. The key to this auditory miracle lies in those iconic features we still marvel at today. Those soaring ribbed vaults and impossibly high ceilings weren't just for show, they were giant acoustic chambers. By pushing the nave walls upward to unprecedented heights, these master builders dramatically increased the volume of air inside the cathedral. Sound waves now had a vast ocean of space to travel through, and this immense journey took time. The result is those famously long reverberation times, often lasting 6, 7, or even 8 seconds. A single note from the choir or a chord from the organ wouldn't just stop. It would hang in the air, blending with the notes that followed, weaving a continuous, shimmering tapestry of sacred sound that felt eternal and unchanging. But it wasn't just about volume. Those elegant flying buttresses, the external stone arcs that look like skeletal wings, were the secret to this entire sonic enterprise. Their primary structural job was to counteract the outward thrust of the incredibly high walls and vaults, allowing those walls to be pierced with massive stained glass windows without the whole building collapsing. This engineering triumph had a profound acoustic side effect. By transferring the structural support to the outside, the interior could be kept completely free of bulky columns and thick walls that would break up sound waves. This created a huge, uninterrupted volume of space, a single, giant resonator where sound could develop fully, traveling vast distances without obstruction. The entire cathedral became a unified instrument, with the nave acting as its monumental soundboard. The ingenuity goes even deeper into the very fabric of the walls themselves. Gothic builders were masters of hidden acoustics. They often constructed hollow pillars or incorporated secret chambers within the masonry. These weren't merely spaces to save on stone. They functioned as Helmholtz resonators, a principle we understand with physics today, but which they discovered through brilliant intuition. Each hollow space, with its specific volume and neck opening, would naturally amplify a very specific frequency when sound waves passed through it, much like blowing across the top of a glass bottle produces a distinct note. A cluster of such resonators tuned to the fundamental notes of Gregorian chant would literally make the building hum in sympathetic vibration with the monks' voices, enriching the sound and giving it a warmth and power that felt superhuman. Simultaneously, the rough, porous texture of the stonework and the intricate carvings covering every surface acted as a natural diffuser, scattering the highest, most dissonant frequencies and absorbing just enough sound to prevent the long reverberation from turning into an unintelligible roar. The cumulative effect of all this engineering was a complete sensory and spiritual immersion. For a medieval worshipper, stepping into Notre Dame or Chartres Cathedral was to step out of the noisy, chaotic, and often harsh outside world and into a realm of ordered, heavenly harmony. The visual awe of the light streaming through the stained glass was matched by the auditory awe of the sound. The human voice, joined with the architecture, was transformed into something greater than itself. You weren't just listening to a prayer, you were inside the prayer. It was an environment meticulously crafted to elevate the spirit, to suggest the infinite, and to provide a palpable experience of the divine through the very air that carried the sound. This represents the absolute pinnacle of acoustic intentionality in the West, where every line, curve, and stone was placed in the service of creating a symphony of faith. While the Gothic architects of the West were mastering the art of amplification, creating vast, resonant chambers designed to elevate the human voice to the heavens, a completely different philosophy of sacred sound was being refined in the East. Here, the spiritual pursuit turned inward, and the architectural goals shifted dramatically. The purpose was no longer to fill a space with sound, but to create a vessel for silence. In the serene environs of a Japanese Zen temple, for instance, you won't find soaring vaults that make whispers travel for seconds. Instead, you encounter an almost palpable quiet, a stillness so profound it feels like its own presence. This is not an absence of noise, but an intentional creation, an architecture of subtraction designed to foster deep meditation through auditory stillness. This pursuit of silence was achieved through a meticulous selection of materials and a masterful understanding of how they interact with sound. Walk across the tatami mat flooring of a temple's main hall. These thick, woven straw mats are naturally absorptive, soaking up the sound of footsteps and preventing any hard, distracting echoes from forming against the floor. The walls are not made of hard, reflective stone, but are often composed of shoji, delicate sliding screens made of wooden lattice and translucent rice paper. These screens don't reflect sound, they allow it to pass through and dissipate, acting as a gentle acoustic filter that softens the outside world. Even the wooden construction itself, using woods like cedar and cypress, contributes to this dampening effect. The intricate joinery and slightly porous nature of the wood absorb mid-range frequencies, creating a warm, muted soundscape that feels intimate and contained. Underpinning this entire design philosophy is a profound cultural concept known as ma, which translates roughly to negative space, interval, or pause. In Western art and music, we often focus on the positive elements, the brushstroke, the note. But in many Eastern traditions, the space between these elements is considered equally, if not more, important. It is the silence between the notes that gives the music its rhythm and meaning. It is the empty space in a painting that gives the subject room to breathe. Zen temple architects applied this principle directly to their craft. They weren't just building walls and roofs, they were carefully designing the empty space within, shaping the air and the silence it held. An asymmetrical layout prevents sound waves from building up in predictable, resonant patterns. The use of transitional spaces, like in gawa verandas, creates buffers between the outside noise and the inner sanctum. Every design choice is made to allow sound to naturally arrive, sit for a moment, and then gracefully dissolve back into nothingness. This creates an environment where the smallest, most natural sounds become events worthy of deep attention. The faint ring of a meditation bell isn't drowned out by reverberation. It blooms in the stillness and fades away cleanly, its entire lifespan perfectly audible. The soft rustle of a monk's robe or the distant call of a bird outside becomes a focal point for mindfulness, not a distraction. The external quiet cultivated by the architecture serves as a mirror for the internal quiet the practitioner seeks to achieve. The goal is to still the chatter of the mind, and the first step is to remove the external stimuli that fuel it. By mastering the art of acoustic absorption, these Eastern architects proved that the most powerful sacred sound is often the one we don't hear, the deep, resonant silence that allows us to finally hear ourselves. This sophisticated approach to sound finds a breathtaking expression in the intricate world of Islamic architecture, where the spiritual and the scientific converge in a symphony of stone and space. Stepping into the Grand Mosque of Istanbul's Süleymaniye complex or the serene courtyards of Granada's Alhambra, one is immediately struck by a unique acoustic atmosphere. It is neither the overwhelming reverberation of a Gothic cathedral nor the absolute silence of a Zen temple, but something uniquely balanced, a sense of intimate clarity within an infinite expanse. The recitation of the Quran here does not boom and echo chaotically. It seems to hang in the air with a crystalline purity, every syllable distinct yet enveloped in a warm, resonant halo that makes the voice feel both close at hand and emanating from the very walls themselves. This is the product of a design philosophy that viewed acoustics as an integral part of divine beauty. The most visually stunning feature, the muqarnas, is also an acoustic marvel in disguise. These breathtaking, honeycomb-like stalactite vaultings that decorate domes and arches are far more than ornate decoration. Their complex, multifaceted surfaces act as a natural and highly sophisticated sound diffuser. In a large, domed space, sound waves can easily collect and create a prolonged, muddy echo that makes spoken word unintelligible. But as these sound waves hit the countless small, angled surfaces of the muqarnas, they are broken up and scattered in a multitude of tiny, randomized reflections. This process effectively prevents a loud, singular echo from forming, eliminating acoustic confusion. However, it doesn't simply kill the sound. Instead, it enriches it. By scattering the waves, the muqarnas preserves the energy and warmth of the human voice, its timbre and depth, while ensuring its clarity. It's akin to the way a diamond cutter facets a gemstone to catch and disperse light. But here, the architects were faceting ceilings to catch and perfect sound, making the imam's recitation sparkle with auditory brilliance. Beyond the walls, another layer of the soundscape is carefully curated through the element of water. Islamic courtyards and sawns almost invariably feature a central fountain or a long, reflective pool. The gentle, consistent trickle and splash of water is not merely a decorative or cooling element. It serves a precise psychoacoustic function. This natural, soothing sound acts as a constant, low-level audio mask. It gently blankets the background, absorbing and softening the potential distractions of distant footsteps, quiet conversations, or street noise from outside the complex. This auditory privacy is crucial for individual contemplation and prayer, allowing each worshipper to feel a sense of secluded focus even within a bustling congregation. The water's sound becomes a non-verbal, rhythmic accompaniment to prayer, a natural white noise machine engineered centuries before the concept existed, fostering a serene environment for connection. All of these elements, the geometry that scatters sound, the materials that gently absorb it, and the water that masks distraction, work in concert to achieve a profound spiritual goal. Islamic architectural philosophy is deeply rooted in the concept of transcending the finite material world to glimpse the infinite divine. The intricate, repeating geometric patterns symbolize the infinite nature of creation, a pattern without beginning or end. The acoustics complement this visual theology perfectly by creating a soundscape that feels both intimately clear and expansively eternal. The architects crafted an environment where the recited word, the direct message of God, could be heard by the believer as if it were being spoken for them alone, yet within the context of the boundless universe. It is a perfect, serene harmony where art, science, and faith are indistinguishable, each elevating the other to create an echo of the infinite here on earth. Yet within the world of sacred architecture, there exists a tradition dedicated not to the propagation of sound, but to its profound absence. In the secluded monasteries of orders like the Cistercians and Trappists, silence is not merely encouraged, it is the very bedrock of spiritual life, a form of prayer in itself. And their architecture is the silent guardian of this vow. This is not the reverberant, heavenly chorus of a Gothic cathedral. This is an architecture of absorption, of hush, meticulously engineered to create a sanctuary of stillness where the only voice one is meant to hear is the subtle, divine whisper within. Step into a medieval monastery like Le Thoronet in France or the Grande Chartreuse in the Alps, and you immediately feel a different kind of quiet. It's a heavy, palpable silence that seems to settle on your shoulders, a quiet so deep it has its own texture. This is achieved through immense, thick stone walls that do more than just keep out the cold. They act as colossal acoustic barriers, isolating the inner world of the cloister from the sonic intrusions of the outside. But the genius lies in how these builders then manage the sound inside this sealed environment. Communal life is inherently noisy: footsteps, the clatter of dishes, the rustle of pages. The monastic architects had to find a way to allow life to continue while sculpting the very air to minimize auditory distraction. Their methods were brilliantly subtle. Notice the corridors, they are rarely straight. Instead, they curve gently, a design feature that is far from arbitrary. A straight corridor acts like an acoustic highway, allowing noise to travel long distances unimpeded. A curved hallway, however, breaks the line of sight for sound waves. Each gentle bend acts as a baffle, causing noise to lose energy as it deflects off the walls, effectively containing sound within a localized area. A conversation in one wing would be completely inaudible just around the corner, preserving the solitude of every monk in his cell. Even the most potentially noisy communal spaces were carefully tuned for quiet. The refectory or dining hall, where the community gathered in silence to eat while one brother read aloud from sacred texts, often featured high, wooden-beamed ceilings. Unlike the stone vaults of a church, this wood is highly absorptive, particularly of the mid-frequencies of human chatter. It soaks up the incidental clinks and shuffles, preventing them from bouncing around the room and creating a distracting din. This ensured that the reader's voice could be heard with clarity and focus, while the collective noise of the meal was softened to a faint, almost rhythmic background accompaniment. Even the courtyards and cloister garths, open to the sky, were strategically placed and planted with grasses and herbs that further dampened sound reflection, creating open-air rooms of tranquility. This meticulous acoustic design was never just a practical solution to a logistical problem. It was a physical manifestation of a deep spiritual philosophy. The vow of silence is about more than not speaking. It is about creating an internal emptiness, a void into which God can speak. By architecturally removing external noise, the builders were facilitating an internal quietude. They were crafting an environment where the constant chatter of the ego and the world could fall away, making space for attentive listening. In this profound silence, the rustle of a habit or the distant call of a bird becomes not an interruption, but a meditation. The most sacred sound, in the end, is the one that is not made by human hands or voice, but the one that is heard in the heart when the world is finally, mercifully quiet. Across the globe and throughout history, indigenous cultures have approached the art of sacred sound from a perspective that stands in beautiful contrast to the grand, engineered structures of the West. For these traditions, the most profound architecture was not built with stone and mortar, but discovered in the living landscape itself. They practiced a form of sacred acoustics where humanity was not the sole architect, but a collaborator with nature, listening intently to the world and learning to amplify its inherent music. This was not about imposing human will upon the environment, but about entering into a dialogue with it, using the contours of the earth as their blueprint and the elements as their instruments. Consider the remarkable kivas of the ancestral Pueblones in the American Southwest. These circular, partially subterranean chambers were far more than simple gathering places. Their design is a masterclass in harnessing natural acoustics. The compact, circular shape with a solid central hearth and a bench ringing the interior creates a unique sonic environment. When a speaker sits or stands in the center, their voice is projected evenly throughout the space, not by electronic amplification, but by the way sound waves reflect off the hard, smooth plastered walls and are focused by the room's geometry. This allows for clear communication, but many researchers believe the purpose ran deeper. The specific resonant frequencies within a kiva, the way a drumbeat or chant would fill the enclosed space and vibrate through the participants, likely served to unify the community in a shared sensory and spiritual experience, connecting them to the earth from which the structure was carved. This intentional use of natural soundscapes reaches its most fascinating expression in places like Chaco Canyon. Here, researchers have discovered something extraordinary. Certain petroglyphs, rock carvings of spirals, and other significant symbols are not placed randomly. They are positioned at precise points on the canyon walls where the acoustics are most powerful. Stand before one of these spirals and clap your hands, and you might be met with a perfect, ringing echo that seems to emanate from the rock art itself. This is no coincidence. It suggests that the architects of Chaco Canyon possessed a sophisticated auditory map of their environment. They identified these natural amplification points and then marked them as sacred, integrating the land's voice directly into their ceremonial practice. The echo wasn't just a sound, it was a response, a voice from the stone world answering the call of the people. This philosophy extends far beyond the deserts of North America. In the British Isles, the great stone circles like Stonehenge and Callanish present another acoustic mystery. While their complete sonic profile is still being studied, their construction using massive, often ringing, stones suggests an awareness of sound properties. The arrangement of these monoliths may have been designed to interact with the wind, creating low-frequency humming or howling tones during ceremonies, or to create sheltered acoustic zones within the circle where sound behaved differently. Similarly, across Australia, many Aboriginal songlines and sacred sites are located in places with distinctive acoustic qualities, canyons that create echoes, waterholes that amplify sound, or rock formations that resonate at specific frequencies when struck. These locations were not chosen in spite of their sound, but because of it. The land was heard as well as seen, and its song became an integral part of the ritual that took place there. This represents a holistic world, where there is no separation between the spiritual, the natural, and the acoustic. The goal was not to build a new instrument, but to play the one that already existed, the earth itself. By listening to the wind patterns through a narrow canyon, the resonance of a particular rock face when struck, or the way water flowing over stones created a constant, masking rhythm, these indigenous architects learned to weave these elements into their ceremonies. They understood that true sacred sound wasn't about dominating a space with human noise, but about harmonizing with the existing chorus of the natural world. Their greatest innovation was their humility, their willingness to listen first and build second, teaching us that the first step in creating a sacred space is not to speak, but to hear the world speaking to us. Imagine the sound not as something that happens inside the space, but as something that happens with it. This is the essence of Gregorian chant, a form of music that is inseparable from the stone that cradles it. These monophonic melodies, rising and falling in a single, unaccompanied vocal line, were not composed for a concert hall or an open field. They were meticulously crafted, note by note, for the specific acoustic environment of the great Romanesque and Gothic churches. The music and the architecture are two halves of a single instrument, designed in a profound and intentional partnership to create an experience that is less about listening and more about being immersed. Every compositional choice was a direct response to the building's sonic character. The famously slow, deliberate tempo of the chant is a masterclass in acoustic adaptation. In a space with a reverberation time of 7 or 8 seconds, a fast, complex melody would become a hopeless jumble of overlapping sound, a dissonant mess as each new note fought with the ghost of the last one still hanging in the air. The slow, spacious pace allows each individual tone the time to fully bloom, to develop and decay naturally within the vast volume of the nave. The notes don't follow each other, they bleed into each other, weaving a continuous, seamless tapestry of sound where the end of one phrase is the beginning of the next, creating a river of tone that feels eternal and unchanging. This is why harmony, as we understand it, is largely absent. Complex chords would create acoustic clashes in such a live environment. Instead, the pure, unharmonized melody lines, often centered on a single, resonant drone note, avoid any potential for dissonance, ensuring the sound remains a smooth, unified, and hypnotic flow. This was no happy accident. It was the result of a remarkable collaboration between two orders of medieval craftsmen, the architects who built the instruments and the monastic musicians who learned to play them. The architects provided the foundational voice, the deep, warm, resonant hum of the limestone vaults. They designed those soaring ceilings not just to draw the eye heavenward, but to act as a giant soundboard, catching the human voice and giving it body, weight, and longevity. The monks, in turn, composed the music that would make that stone sing in its most perfect voice. They understood the resonant frequencies of their home church, the way certain notes would make the entire structure sympathetically vibrate. Their compositions highlighted those frequencies, using long, sustained tones that allowed the building's own resonance to amplify and enrich the sound, making a small group of singers sound like a celestial host. The effect of this synergy is something beyond mere music. It is a form of auditory architecture that constructs a spiritual state of mind. For the medieval worshipper, standing in the dim light, the source of the sound became ambiguous. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, from the shadows in the arches, from the light filtering through the windows, from the very air itself. This dissolution of the individual voice into a collective, omnipresent sound was a powerful metaphor for the dissolution of the self into the divine. The long reverberation erased the sharp edges of each individual note, just as the ritual was meant to erase the boundaries of the individual ego. The sound became a physical environment to get lost in, a gateway to a meditative, trance-like state of prayer. In this sacred partnership, the silent stones found their voice, and the human voice found its eternity, proving that true silence is not an absence of sound, but the space where sound and spirit become one. If the Gothic era was about reaching for the heavens with sound, the Renaissance was about bringing that celestial harmony down to a human scale with breathtaking precision. This was a time of rediscovery when European thinkers looked back to the mathematical ideals of the ancient Greeks and Romans, believing that the secrets of the universe and of perfect beauty could be found in number and proportion. For architects, this wasn't just an abstract philosophy. It became a practical toolkit for crafting spaces that were not only visually sublime but acoustically perfect. They began to see a building not as a container for sound, but as an instrument to be tuned, and in doing so, they initiated a profound shift from treating acoustics as an observed art to a calculated science. At the forefront of this revolution was Filippo Brunelleschi, the goldsmith-turned-architect who famously cracked the engineering puzzle of the Florence Cathedral dome. But his genius extended far beyond structural stability. Brunelleschi was obsessed with perspective and proportion. conducting meticulous surveys of ancient Roman ruins to understand their harmonious ratios. He applied this mathematical rigor to acoustics, understanding that the dimensions of a room, its length, width, and height in relation to each other, would determine how sound waves behaved within it. His goal was to create what we would now call an even sound field, where audio was distributed clearly and consistently throughout a space, eliminating the dead spots where speech becomes muffled and the hot spots where it becomes overwhelming. We can hear his principles at work in one of his masterpieces, the Pazzi Chapel in Florence. Step inside this elegantly serene space, and you immediately notice its perfect balance. Unlike the overwhelming verticality of a Gothic cathedral, the chapel's dimensions are based on a series of interlocking squares and circles, governed by the harmonic ratios Brunelleschi revered. The result is an acoustic environment of remarkable clarity and warmth. The elliptical dome overhead is not just a beautiful ceiling, it acts as a perfect sound diffuser, gently scattering waves so that a speaker's voice carries with even intelligibility to every corner of the room. There are no echoes, yet the sound feels full and present. It's a space designed for intimate discourse and refined music, where every word and every note can be appreciated with perfect fidelity, a testament to the idea that divine harmony could be achieved through human calculation. This mathematical approach coincided with a musical revolution, the rise of polyphony. Medieval Gregorian chant was a single, unadorned melodic line, perfectly suited to the long, blending reverberation of Gothic naves. But Renaissance composers like Pellestrina and Josquin des Prez were weaving multiple, independent vocal lines together into intricate tapestries of sound. This complex, interlocking music would have turned into an indecipherable muddle inside a 7-second echo. The new music demanded a new kind of space, and the architects responded. This era saw the creation of the first dedicated music chapels and smaller, purpose-built chambers for courtly performances. These spaces were designed with lower ceilings and more absorptive materials, like wood paneling and tapestries, to reduce reverberation time significantly. This drier acoustic environment allowed the complex harmonies and counterpoints of polyphonic masses and madrigals to be heard with all their intricate detail intact. The architecture and the music evolved in a direct, conscious dialogue, each pushing the other toward greater sophistication. Ultimately, the Renaissance pursuit of perfect proportion was about more than acoustic engineering or aesthetic beauty. It was a spiritual and philosophical statement. Architects and their patrons believed that by embedding mathematical harmony into their buildings, they were reflecting the very order of the cosmos. They saw a direct link between the ratios that made a musical chord pleasing to the ear, the geometry that made a room pleasing to the eye, and the divine logic that governed the movement of the planets. A well-proportioned chapel wasn't just a pretty building, it was a microcosm of a harmonious universe, a place where one could literally step inside the mind of God. To hear clear, beautiful sound in such a space was to experience that cosmic order firsthand, an auditory proof of a rational and beautifully arranged creation. This fusion of science, art, and spirit marked the true birth of acoustics as a discipline, setting the stage for the next act in our story, where this science would be applied to create the most dramatic and emotionally charged sacred soundscapes yet imagined. The Baroque era ushered in a new kind of sacred spectacle, one where architecture, drama, and sound converged to create an overwhelming emotional experience. If the Renaissance sought perfect harmonic proportion, the Baroque aimed for pure, visceral impact. This was the birth of sacred theatre, and its stages were not just platforms for performance. They were intricate acoustic machines designed to command the heart and soul of every single listener. Enter a space like the Teatro Olimpico in Vicenza, completed in 1585. From the outside, it might seem like a classical revival, but step inside and you are immediately drawn into a stunning visual illusion, a fixed perspective stage set that uses forced perspective to make a shallow stage appear to stretch into endless classical streets. This visual trickery, however, was matched by an equally sophisticated auditory genius. The architects of these spaces realized that for the drama to truly land, for the spiritual message of an oratorio or a passion play to stir the soul, every member of the audience had to hear the anguish, the joy, and the revelation as if they were standing next to the characters. To achieve this, they employed a series of groundbreaking acoustic innovations. Those magnificent concave surfaces and curved balconies were not merely decorative. They functioned as massive acoustic reflectors, carefully angled to catch the sound waves from the stage and bounce them directly into the audience. Think of them as the first sound systems, giant stone satellites focusing the human voice. The layered tiers of boxes and galleries did more than just provide seating for the elite. They broke up the large volume of the theater into smaller acoustic zones, preventing sound from getting lost in the vastness of the ceiling, while also providing additional hard surfaces to reflect energy back toward the main floor. Even the orchestra pit, a feature that became standard in this period, served a dual purpose. It housed the musicians, yes, but its sunken design also prevented the instruments from acoustically overwhelming the singers, while its open mouth projected their combined sound upward and outward, blending music and voice into a powerful, directed force. The goal was absolute emotional intensity. Baroque artists and architects operated under a principle known as theatrum sacrum, the idea that religious devotion could be heightened through theatrical means. They understood that sound is a primary carrier of emotion. A whispered prayer needed to be audible in the farthest corner to create intimacy and suspense. A chorus of angels needed to swell with a breathtaking, surround sound quality to inspire awe and wonder. By shaping the architecture to control sound with such precision, they could manipulate the emotional journey of the congregation, guiding them through the narrative peaks and valleys of a biblical story with the skill of a master composer conducting an orchestra. The experience was designed to be multisensory, a devotional spectacle where the stunning visuals, the evocative music, and the crystal-clear acoustics worked in concert to break down intellectual barriers and speak directly to the heart. This theatrical approach did not stay confined to dedicated theaters. Its influence profoundly shaped the design of churches in the Baroque period. Look at the magnificent churches of Rome like Il Gesù or Sant'Andrea della Valle. Their interiors are not the relatively austere spaces of the Renaissance. They are dynamic, dramatic, and immersive. The long naves are often lined with side chapels that create acoustic niches, while the grandiose domes overhead act as vast resonators for the magnificent choirs and orchestras that became central to Baroque liturgy. The purpose was the same, to create an overwhelming sensory experience that made the divine feel immediate, palpable, and emotionally resonant. The line between the sacred theater and the church itself had blurred, creating a new architectural language where sanctity and spectacle became one. For centuries, the astonishing acoustics of ancient sacred spaces were understood primarily through experience and anecdote, a feeling, a story, a sense of awe passed down through generations. We could stand in the Hagia Sophia and be overwhelmed by how a chant seemed to linger in the air for 10 seconds or more, but we could only guess at the precise mechanisms behind this miracle. Today, that guessing is over. We have entered a remarkable new era of discovery, where cutting-edge technology allows us to literally map the silence, to take the intangible genius of the past and render it into precise, measurable data. This isn't just about satisfying our curiosity. It's about conducting a conversation across millennia, using the tools of modern science to finally understand the language spoken by the architects of silence. The key to this conversation is a process known as impulse response testing. Imagine a researcher standing in the very center of a vast, ancient cathedral. They set up a highly sensitive microphone array and then produce a very short, sharp sound, a starter pistol's crack or a balloon pop. This sound impulse contains all frequencies, high and low, in a single, instantaneous burst. The microphones then capture exactly how the building responds to that sound, how long it takes to decay, which frequencies are emphasized, which are absorbed, and how the sound waves travel and reflect off every surface. This data creates a unique acoustic fingerprint for the space, a sonic blueprint that can be analyzed to understand its behavior with incredible precision. It's like giving the building a hearing test and seeing exactly how it listens and responds. When this was done in the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, the results were nothing short of breathtaking. The data revealed that the building's massive dome and semi-domes create a powerful resonance peak at 55 Hz. This is a very low, deep frequency that falls squarely within the fundamental range of the adult male voice, particularly when chanting in a bass or baritone register. This means that when a priest intoned the liturgy, the architecture itself would sympathetically vibrate, amplifying and enriching his voice, giving it a palpable, physical power that could be felt in the chests of the congregation. The building wasn't a passive container, it was an active participant in the ritual, a colossal amplifier tuned perfectly to the human voice in prayer. This proves beyond any doubt that the 6th century architects of Justinian, Anthemius of Tralles and Isidorus of Malta, weren't just engineering a stable dome. They were, whether through calculation or brilliant intuition, engineering a specific sonic experience. This scientific validation extends far beyond the Mediterranean. In the jungles of Central America, archaeologists using laser scanning technology, or LiDAR, have made similar discoveries at Mayan pyramid sites like Chichen Itza. The steps of the Great Pyramid of Kukulkan, known as El Castillo, are not just a staircase, they are a sophisticated acoustic instrument. When a person claps their hands at the base of the pyramid, the sound wave travels up the steep, limestone steps. The spacing and angle of each step are such that they act like a diffraction grating, reflecting the sound back in a series of rapid, discrete echoes. To the human ear, this creates a piercing, chirping sound that uncannily mimics the cry of the sacred Quetzal bird, a creature deeply woven into Mayan mythology. Laser scans confirm the precise angles that produce this effect, strongly suggesting it was an intentional design feature, a way to make the very stones cry out with the voice of a divine messenger during ceremonies. This fusion of archaeology and acoustics is revolutionizing our understanding of the past. It moves us from wondering if an acoustic effect was intentional to understanding how and why it was achieved. We are no longer simply admiring the silent beauty of a ruin. We are learning to hear it as its builders intended. This knowledge is also crucial for preservation. Before any restoration work begins on a historic site, acoustic archaeologists can create a detailed 3D model of its sound profile. This ensures that any repairs or cleaning of stone surfaces are done in a way that preserves, not alters, its unique auditory signature. We can now protect not just how these places look, but how they feel to be in, safeguarding the full, immersive experience for future generations. This scientific journey doesn't diminish the mystery of these places. It deepens our awe for the ingenious minds who, without oscilloscopes or computers, learn to compose with stone and space, writing symphonies for the soul that we are only now beginning to fully hear. So far, we've explored the physical and spiritual dimensions of sacred sound, but there's a deeper layer to this mystery, one that unfolds not in the stones, but within the human mind itself. The profound psychological impact of these acoustic environments suggests the ancient architects were not just engineers of space, but inadvertent pioneers of neuroscience, crafting experiences that could literally alter consciousness. When you stand in a cathedral with an 8-second reverberation, you're not just hearing a sound, you are being bathed in a sonic environment that has a direct, measurable effect on your brain. This prolonged, slow decay of sound acts as a form of auditory driving, a rhythmic sensory stimulation that can guide the brain into synchronized patterns. Specifically, the constant, enveloping wash of reverberation can gently nudge the brain from its everyday beta waves associated with active, analytical thought into the slower, more relaxed alpha wave state. This is the mental territory of daydreaming, meditation, and heightened suggestibility, a state where the critical mind relaxes its guard and the individual becomes far more open to emotional and spiritual impressions. This phenomenon is powerfully amplified by the nature of the music composed for these spaces, like Gregorian chant. The monophonic, drone-based melodies often hover around a resonant frequency of the room itself, sometimes even aligning with the natural frequency of the human skull. This can create a subtle vibration felt internally, a somatic experience that further deepens the trance-like state. Modern research has even drawn parallels to the effects of binaural beats, where slightly different frequencies presented to each ear cause the brain to perceive a third, rhythmic tone that can also encourage alpha or theta brainwave activity. While the monks weren't generating binaural beats with headphones, the complex interplay of direct sound from the choir and the reflected, slightly delayed sound from the walls could create a similar, immersive pulsation that washes over the listener, guiding their mental state toward tranquility and focus. It is almost certain that these effects were discovered not through laboratory experiments, but through centuries of careful, empirical observation. A medieval abbot might not have understood brain waves, but he would have intimately understood the transformative power of the liturgy within his church. He would have seen how the same prayer spoken in the quiet of the cloister had a different effect than when it was sung within the reverberant nave. The builders and clergy worked in a continuous feedback loop, noticing how certain architectural modifications enhanced the spiritual intensity of the ceremonies. They learned that a space that made the chant linger longer seemed to foster a deeper collective meditation, that it made congregants feel a greater sense of awe and connection. They were, in essence, tuning the building to tune the mind, using the physical manipulation of sound as a tool for mental and emotional transformation. This understanding elevates their work from magnificent construction to something approaching psychoacoustic alchemy. They realized that architecture could be a catalyst for inner change. By designing an environment that reduced stress, quieted the internal chatter of the brain, and promoted a peaceful yet focused awareness, they were creating the ideal conditions for a personal encounter with the divine. The sound becomes a vehicle carrying the listener away from the mundane and into the numinous. This proves that these silent architects were shaping far more than space. They were sculpting human consciousness itself, crafting experiences that could elevate the spirit by first calming the mind. This profound psychological insight, embedded in stone and song, is perhaps their most enduring and brilliant legacy. After centuries of innovation, the story of sacred acoustics has not ended. It has entered a thrilling new chapter. A remarkable shift is underway in the world of architecture, a conscious return to the wisdom of the past, not as a nostalgic imitation, but as a profound fusion of ancient intuition and cutting-edge technology. Today's designers, armed with powerful computer modeling and new materials, are looking back to the masters of the Hypogeum, the Gothic nave, and the Zen temple, asking a simple but revolutionary question: how can we build spaces for the modern soul that possess the same transformative power? The answer lies in a new generation of buildings that are not merely functional shelters, but intentional environments for well-being, using the lessons of history to shape sound for a new age. Consider the breathtaking Cathedral of Christ the Light in Oakland, California. From the outside, its sweeping curves of glass and aluminum speak a distinctly modern architectural language. But step inside, and you are met with an auditory experience that feels both ancient and futuristic. The architects faced a modern challenge: how to create the warm, enveloping reverberation of a stone cathedral without the 8-second echo that would render a spoken sermon unintelligible. Their solution was a masterpiece of technological homage. They lined the interior walls with 21st-century versions of Gothic stone, vast, computer-modeled panels of fine-grained cedar, each one perforated with millions of microscopic, laser-cut holes. This high-tech wood functions as a tuned acoustic filter, much like the porous limestone of Chartres, but with precise scientific control. It absorbs just enough of the higher frequencies to ensure speech clarity, while allowing the lower, resonant tones of the pipe organ and choir to swell and blend, creating that celestial wash of sound that has defined sacred spaces for a millennium. It is a building that listens to its purpose, using technology not to overpower tradition, but to fulfill its deepest intention with newfound precision. This modern revival is not confined to grand cathedrals or the Christian tradition. Around the world, a new wave of interfaith meditation centers, mindfulness retreats, and secular spaces for contemplation are applying ancient principles of acoustic absorption to combat the constant noise of modern life. In these Zen-inspired sanctuaries, you won't find complex algorithms, but a return to the fundamental power of natural materials. Walls of rammed earth with their dense, textured layers provide immense mass to block external noise, while their uneven surfaces break up sound waves within, preventing any harsh reflections. Floors of reclaimed timber and ceilings lined with bamboo latticework offer the same soft, absorptive qualities as the tatami mats and paper screens of a traditional Japanese temple. The goal is identical to that of the monastic builders, to architect silence. These spaces are designed as antidotes to digital overload, offering an environment where the mind can settle, the nervous system can calm, and the only thing to listen to is the gentle rhythm of one's own breath. It is a powerful testament to the enduring truth that sometimes the most advanced technology is a deep understanding of nature itself. This global movement is more than a stylistic trend. It represents a fundamental reawakening to the idea that our surroundings actively shape our inner experience. Modern neuroscience and psychology now provide the data to confirm what the ancient builders knew intuitively: that sound directly impacts stress, focus, and emotional states. Today's architects are therefore not just designers. They are becoming custodians of mental and spiritual well-being, the new architects of silence. They are proving that the quest for acoustic harmony is a timeless human need, as relevant in our age of concrete and glass as it was in the age of stone and timber. By blending the old wisdom with new innovation, they ensure that the sacred power of sound, whether in a whisper that carries across a room or in a silence that speaks volumes, continues to resonate, offering solace and connection in an increasingly noisy world. But to truly grasp the depth of this symbolic language, we must listen beyond the stone and mortar to the spiritual intentions embedded within the sound itself. An echo in a vast cathedral is not merely a physical phenomenon. For the medieval Christian, it was a powerful oral metaphor. When a single spoken prayer blossoms into a sustained chorus of overlapping reverberations, it becomes a sonic illustration of eternity. The human voice, finite and fleeting, is caught by the architecture and transformed into something endless and unchanging, a whisper from the mortal world that is answered and amplified by the divine. The building itself seems to be speaking back, suggesting that every human utterance is heard, held, and given infinite significance in the mind of God. This transforms the entire space into a living lesson, teaching through experience that faith transcends the boundaries of time and space. This stands in beautiful contrast to the symbolic power of sound in Eastern traditions. In a Japanese Zen rock garden, the profound silence is not an empty void but a potent symbol of mu, or nothingness, the fertile ground of pure potential from which all creation arises. The careful raking of the gravel creates ripples that are purely visual. There is no accompanying sound. This intentional absence of auditory stimulation is a direct instruction in mindfulness, guiding the observer to quiet their internal dialogue and perceive the world without the filter of language or judgment. The rare, sharp ring of a meditation bell piercing this silence does not break it but instead heightens awareness of it, much like a single star appears brighter against the blackest night sky. Here, the architecture of sound is one of subtraction, symbolizing the emptying of the self to make room for enlightenment. This symbolic coding extends to the very concept of resonance. Across countless cultures, the idea that a perfectly tuned string or a chanting voice could make a space hum in sympathetic vibration was seen as far more than an acoustic trick. It was physical proof of harmony, a demonstration that the universe operates on interconnected vibrational principles. In a Hindu temple, when the chanting of a specific mantra causes the entire mandapa to resonate at a fundamental frequency, it is experienced as the manifestation of Nada Brahman, the belief that the entire cosmos was created from and is sustained by divine sound. The architect, by calibrating the dimensions and materials to respond to these sacred frequencies, wasn't just building a hall. They were constructing a conduit for worshippers to physically feel their connection to the cosmic order, to literally vibrate in tune with the divine. Every architectural decision, therefore, becomes a carrier of meaning. The labyrinthine corridors of a monastery that gradually muffle the outside world are a physical path toward inner quiet. The whispering gallery of a Renaissance dome, where a secret can be shared across a vast distance, becomes a symbol of confidential prayer heard by God alone. Even the use of specific numbers of columns or the alignment of a structure to celestial events often had an acoustic counterpart, embedding a multilayered symbolism where number, astronomy, and sound all reinforced the same spiritual truth. These spaces were designed as immersive textbooks for the soul, where one didn't just learn about theology through words, but experienced its core principles through the very air one breathed. The silent architects were, in the end, profound philosophers, using geometry and physics to write poetry in stone, teaching us that to build for the spirit is to speak a language that is heard not only with the ears, but with the entire being. While the whispering galleries of Renaissance domes represent a pinnacle of calculated acoustic design, they invite us to look even further back in time, to a civilization that approached sacred sound with a power and mystery all its own. The sands of Egypt hold secrets that resonate through the millennia, where the very stones seem to hum with the echoes of forgotten rituals. Stepping into the hypostyle hall of Karnak or the inner sanctum of the great temple of Ammon at Luxor is to enter a world where architecture was engineered not just for the eyes of the pharaohs, but for the ears of the gods. Here, the approach to acoustics was less about the delicate focus of a whisper and more about the overwhelming physical force of resonance, a technology of awe designed to manifest the divine presence on earth. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Imagine a forest of stone, not of trees, massive sandstone columns towering 70 feet high, each one so wide it would take 5 people with outstretched arms to circle it. These are not arranged in simple rows but packed closely together, their surfaces covered in deeply incised hieroglyphs and depictions of gods and pharaohs. This dense, textured landscape is the key to the Egyptian acoustic environment. When a priest began a rhythmic chant or struck a ceremonial sistrum, the sound waves didn't have a clear path to travel. Instead, they were broken up and scattered by the countless carved surfaces and the tight spaces between the columns. This might seem like it would muffle the sound, but the effect is quite the opposite for low frequencies. The deep, fundamental tones of the human voice and the drone of long trumpets were captured and amplified within this stone forest, creating a powerful, enveloping rumble that vibrated through the floor and into the bodies of the participants. The higher frequencies, the sharp consonants and metallic jangles, were absorbed and diffused by the rough sandstone, leaving behind a low-frequency wash of sound that felt less like something heard and more like something felt, a physical manifestation of power that bypassed the intellect to speak directly to the primal self. This was no accident. Egyptologists and acoustic archaeologists now believe this design was intensely intentional, serving multiple layers of spiritual and political purpose. For the elite priests and the pharaoh, who alone had access to the deepest, most restricted parts of the temple, this acoustic environment would have heightened the intensity of the ritual, using sound to induce a state of heightened awareness or trance, facilitating their connection to the gods. For the common people, restricted to the outer courtyards, the experience was different but equally powerful. They would hear this deep, indistinct rumble emanating from the forbidden, dark interior of the temple, a sound without a visible source, mysterious and terrifying. This auditory experience reinforced the absolute power and otherworldliness of the priesthood and the divine king. The temple itself became a vocalizing entity, its stone throat producing the mighty voice of the god, a sound designed to inspire obedience, fear, and devotion through its sheer, incomprehensible power. The architecture was a tool for psychological and social control, using low-frequency resonance to assert a palpable, undeniable authority. The mystery deepens when we consider the specific materials and their symbolic resonance. The Egyptians often used granite for the thresholds of inner sanctuaries and for the statues of gods themselves. Granite is an incredibly dense, hard stone with exceptional resonant properties. It can ring like a bell when struck. Was this a quality they were aware of? Could the act of crossing a granite threshold have produced a specific, significant tone? Furthermore, the use of the spoken word was itself sacred. The Egyptians believed in the concept of Heka, the power of the spoken word to create reality. The precise recitation of a spell or a god's name was not a request. It was an act of creation and maintenance, upholding the order of the universe against the forces of chaos. In this context, the acoustics of the temple were not just a backdrop for ritual. They were an essential component of the ritual's efficacy. The architecture ensured the sacred words were given weight, power, and longevity, physically bolstering them as they traveled from the human realm to the divine. The stones were partners in prayer, engineered to make sure the gods were not just called upon but truly heard. While the pyramids of Egypt harnessed the raw power of low-frequency resonance, the sacred architecture of India pursued a different sonic ideal, one of brilliant, crystalline clarity designed to manifest the divine through sound itself. In the vast and intricate tradition of Hindu temple design, every element is meticulously calculated to serve a profound spiritual purpose, and acoustics are not an added feature but a foundational principle. The heart of this auditory philosophy is the mandapa, the pillared hall that often serves as the gateway to the inner sanctum. Unlike the closely packed, massive columns of Karnak that created a dense, rumbling atmosphere, the columns in a Hindu mandapa are precisely spaced and proportioned according to complex mathematical formulae derived from Vastu Shastra, the ancient science of architecture. This isn't arbitrary geometry. It is a calculated effort to create standing waves that perfectly enhance the human voice during chanting. The specific intervals between pillars can cause the sound waves from a recited mantra to reinforce each other, amplifying the sacred syllables without creating a chaotic echo, allowing the vibration to fill the space with a cohesive and powerful energy. The selection of materials further refines this acoustic intent. While Egyptian builders used sandstone for its mass and absorptive qualities, Indian temple architects frequently chose granite and sandstone for their bright, reflective sonic characteristics. These hard, polished stones act as excellent sound mirrors, reflecting high frequencies with exceptional efficiency. This ensures that the intricate melodies of Vedic chants and the piercing, pure tone of a ritual bell remain sharp and intelligible, cutting through the space with a clarity that feels almost supernatural. This auditory brilliance is deeply intertwined with the core Hindu concept of Nada Brahman, the belief that the entire universe was created from and is sustained by divine, primordial sound. In this worldview, the chanting of a mantra is not merely a recitation. It is an act of cosmic maintenance, a way of aligning individual consciousness with the vibrational fabric of existence. The temple, therefore, must function as a resonant chamber for this sacred work, its architecture fine-tuned to ensure the sound is produced and projected with perfect purity. This intricate design often extends to the smallest details, where art and acoustics merge seamlessly. The ceilings of many mandapas are not flat, but are intricately carved into domed or pyramidal shapes, often adorned with stunning lotus patterns or other sacred geometry. These are not merely decorative, they function as sophisticated acoustic diffusers, scattering sound waves gently to prevent harsh echoes and ensure an even distribution of energy throughout the hall. Even the statues of deities housed in niches along the walls can play a role. The curves and angles of these sculptures can act as subtle sound diffusers and reflectors, helping to blend the direct sound from the priests with the reflected sound from the walls, creating a continuous, enveloping flow of sacred noise that feels both omnipresent and intimately focused. The entire structure becomes a single, integrated instrument, played by the faithful to resonate in harmony with the universe itself. While the pyramids of Egypt harnessed the raw power of low-frequency resonance and the Gothic cathedrals of Europe sought to create an enveloping wash of sacred sound, the sacred architecture of India pursued a different, equally profound sonic ideal, one of brilliant, crystalline clarity designed to manifest the divine through vibration itself. Step inside the mandapa of a great Hindu temple, like the one at Meenakshi Amman in Madurai or the Sun Temple at Konark, and you are immediately surrounded by a forest of stone. But unlike the dense, overwhelming columns of Karnak, these pillars are arranged with breathtaking mathematical precision. Each one is not merely a support, it is a carefully calibrated component in a vast acoustic instrument. The spacing between them is not left to chance but is derived from ancient texts on Vastu Shastra, the traditional Indian system of architecture. These precise intervals are calculated to create perfect standing waves, specific, stable patterns where sound waves reinforce each other as they reflect between the parallel surfaces. When a priest begins a Vedic chant, the syllables of the ancient Sanskrit mantras don't just echo, they are caught and amplified by this invisible architecture of air, their vibrational power magnified to fill the entire space with a cohesive, energized hum that feels both immense and intimately focused. This meticulous engineering is matched by an equally intentional selection of materials, where Gothic builders chose porous limestone for its warm absorption. The architects of these mandapas most often selected granite and a specific, fine-grained sandstone. These are hard, dense stones with smooth, often highly polished surfaces. Their physical properties make them exceptional acoustic mirrors. They do not absorb sound, they reflect it with incredible efficiency, particularly the higher frequencies that give the human voice its intelligibility and the ritual bell its piercing, pure tone. This ensures that every sacred syllable, every consonant in a mantra, is projected with knife-edge clarity. There is no muddiness, no blurring of the sacred words. The sound that fills the hall is bright, articulate, and resonant, allowing the complex philosophical and devotional meanings of the chants to be communicated with perfect fidelity. It is a sound that feels both ancient and immediate, as if the stone itself is speaking in a voice of unwavering purity. The genius of the design often reveals itself in the smallest, most beautiful details. Look up at the ceiling of a mandapa, and you will frequently find it is not flat but carved into an intricate domed or pyramidal shape, adorned with stunning lotus blossoms or other sacred geometric patterns. This is far more than decoration. These complex, faceted surfaces act as natural sound diffusers, gently scattering the sound waves that travel upward from the floor. This prevents the formation of harsh, distracting echoes and ensures the acoustic energy is distributed evenly throughout the hall, so that a listener standing in any corner experiences the same rich, clear sound. Even the statues of deities housed in ornate niches along the walls serve a dual purpose. Beyond their religious significance, their curved forms and projecting angles subtly break up and reflect sound waves, helping to blend the direct sound from the chanting priests with the reflected sound from the walls and pillars. This creates a seamless, continuous flow of sacred noise that feels omnipresent, as if it is emanating from the entire temple structure rather than a single human source. All of this intricate acoustic design is in the service of a profound spiritual philosophy known as Nada Brahman. This concept translates to sound as the absolute, or the world as sound. It is the belief that the entire universe was created from and is continually sustained by a primordial, divine vibration, a silent cosmic hum that is the essence of all reality. In this worldview, the human act of chanting a mantra is not merely a prayer or an invocation. It is a direct participation in this cosmic process, an act of aligning individual consciousness with the fundamental fabric of existence. Therefore, the temple's architecture has a sacred duty. It must be a perfect resonator for this work. The mandapa becomes a giant amplifier for the divine, its pillars and domes fine-tuned to the frequencies of creation. The clarity of the sound is not an aesthetic preference. It is a spiritual necessity, ensuring that the vibrational offering made by the worshippers is pure, potent, and effective. In this way, the very act of listening to a chant in such a space becomes a form of meditation, and the architecture itself becomes an active, indispensable form of worship. Yet this remarkable auditory legacy, honed over millennia, now faces a silent crisis of its own. The very stones that have sung for centuries are under threat, not from a single cataclysm, but from the slow, insidious pressures of the modern world. Air pollution deposits a thin, acidic grime on limestone surfaces, subtly clogging the porous stone that gives Gothic cathedrals their warm reverberation. Well-intentioned but ill-informed restoration projects can be even more damaging, replacing historic plaster with modern, acoustically dead concrete or installing sound-absorbing panels to improve speech intelligibility for tourists inadvertently silencing the very soul of the space. Even the gentle vibration from nearby traffic or construction can, over decades, cause microfractures in ancient masonry, changing the way sound waves travel through the structure. The tragedy is that these changes are often irreversible. Once the unique acoustic fingerprint of a 500-year-old chapel is altered, it is lost forever, turning a living instrument into a mute museum piece. In response to this quiet emergency, a new field of preservation has emerged, one that listens as intently as it looks. Acoustic archaeologists are now entering these sacred spaces not with trowels and brushes, but with sophisticated digital ears. Using a technique called impulse response testing, they create a unique sonic blueprint of a building. They produce a short, sharp sound, a balloon pop or a starter pistol crack, and then use an array of ultra-sensitive microphones to map exactly how that sound behaves within the space. They measure how long it takes to decay, which frequencies are emphasized by the architecture, and how the sound travels to every corner. This data creates a precise acoustic fingerprint, a baseline that captures the auditory genius of the original architects. This isn't just about recording an echo, it's about preserving the complete vibrational personality of a place, saving its voice for future generations. This scientific approach is revolutionizing how we care for our oldest buildings. Consider the meticulous restoration of Canterbury Cathedral. Before cleaning even a single stone, conservators first performed extensive acoustic mapping. This allowed them to understand exactly how the soot and grime were affecting the sound. They discovered that the filth was actually deadening the high frequencies, muting the brilliant clarity that would have once characterized the space. Their cleaning process then became incredibly precise, removing the harmful pollutants while being careful to preserve the original stone's natural texture and porosity, the very qualities that give it its reflective voice. In other projects, this data prevents well-meaning errors. Instead of using modern plaster that would absorb too much sound, restorers can now source historically accurate materials that match the acoustic properties of the originals, ensuring that a repaired vault will sing with the same voice as its medieval counterpart. This work moves far beyond technical preservation. It is an act of profound cultural respect. The acoustic environment of a sacred space is not a secondary feature. It is as integral to its meaning as the stained glass or the altar. The 8-second reverberation in a cathedral is not an architectural accident. It is the vehicle for transcendence, the mechanism that transforms human chant into a heavenly chorus. The profound silence of a Zen temple is not mere absence of noise. It is the carefully crafted container for enlightenment. To preserve only the visual shell of these places while allowing their sound to be corrupted is to save the body but lose the soul. By committing to acoustic conservation, we are honoring the full intention of the architects of silence. We are acknowledging that they built for the ear as much as for the eye, and we are ensuring that their timeless symphony of stone and space will never fall silent. This profound spiritual intent transforms these spaces from impressive buildings into active participants in the search for meaning. Consider the experience of a medieval worshipper stepping from a noisy, chaotic, and often harsh medieval street into the cool, reverberant embrace of a cathedral like Chartres. The visual awe of the light streaming through stained glass was matched by an auditory environment that felt completely otherworldly. The 8-second decay of a single chanted note wasn't just a sound, it was a physical manifestation of eternity. It suggested that a human prayer, finite and fleeting, could be caught by the architecture and transformed into something endless, a whisper from the mortal world that was answered and amplified into the divine. The building itself seemed to be speaking, teaching through direct experience that faith transcends the boundaries of time and space. This was psychoacoustic theology, a lesson delivered not from a pulpit but through the very air one breathed. This stands in beautiful contrast to the spiritual goal of a Japanese Zen rock garden, where the architecture of sound is one of profound subtraction. The carefully raked gravel creates ripples that are purely visual. There is no accompanying sound. The utter silence is not an empty void but a potent symbol of mu, or nothingness, the fertile ground of pure potential from which all creation is believed to arise. This intentional absence of auditory stimulation is a direct instruction in mindfulness, guiding the observer to quiet their internal dialogue and perceive the world without the filter of language or judgment. The rare, sharp ring of a meditation bell that occasionally pierces this silence does not break it but instead heightens awareness of it, much like a single star appears brighter against the blackest night sky. Here, the architect's purpose was to create a vessel for inner listening, where the only voice one is meant to hear is the subtle, divine whisper within. Across these diverse traditions, the architects saw themselves as far more than builders. They were mediators, translators, and conduits for a higher reality. A master mason carving a Gothic vault or a Zen master designing a temple layout operated under the conviction that they were crafting a bridge between the earthly and the heavenly realms. Their tools were not just chisels and squares but geometry, mathematics, and a deep, intuitive understanding of human perception. They believed that by creating an environment that could alter consciousness, whether through overwhelming reverberation or utter stillness, they were facilitating a direct encounter with the sacred. The building became an instrument of revelation, its purpose to dissolve the boundaries of the self and allow the individual to touch the eternal. This sacred duty elevates their work from mere construction to the highest form of spiritual practice, a tangible act of devotion etched in stone and silence. Understanding this deeper layer of intention completely changes how we perceive these ancient sites. We begin to see that every curved wall, every chosen material, every mathematical proportion was a deliberate stroke in a grand, invisible masterpiece. The Whispering Gallery in a Renaissance dome is no longer just a clever acoustic trick. It becomes a symbol of confidential prayer, a secret shared directly with the divine. The low, resonant hum of an Egyptian temple is not an accidental byproduct but the engineered voice of a god, designed to inspire awe and obedience. This perspective invites us to listen not just with our ears, but with our historical and spiritual imagination, hearing in the silence the profound hopes and genius of those who believed that architecture could be the most powerful prayer of all. So how can we, as modern visitors, truly hear what these ancient architects intended? The first step is the simplest: just listen. Next time you find yourself in one of these venerable spaces, resist the urge to immediately take a photo. Instead, find a quiet spot, close your eyes for a moment, and just breathe in the silence. Then, if you're with a companion, try a simple experiment. Have them walk across the room and whisper something. You might be astonished at how clearly their voice carries, as if the very stones are acting as a natural telephone line, a secret channel woven into the architecture centuries ago. This simple act of focused listening transforms a tourist visit into a personal archaeological dig, allowing you to uncover the hidden auditory layer of the building for yourself. For a more structured and profound experience, seek out the special events that many of these historic sites now offer. An increasing number of European cathedrals, from York Minster in England to the Duomo in Florence, host occasional candlelit concerts or dedicated sound meditation sessions. These events are not just performances, they are carefully curated acoustic demonstrations. To hear a small choir perform a Gregorian chant in a nave with an 8-second reverberation is to experience the space as it was meant to be experienced. The individual voices merge into a single, ethereal ribbon of sound that seems to have no beginning and no end, washing over you in a way that is physically and emotionally palpable. It's in these moments that the intellectual understanding of acoustic principles gives way to a visceral, awe-inspiring encounter with the past. You're not just learning about history, you are feeling the intention of the builders and the devotion of countless generations who worshipped there. And for those who cannot travel to these distant sites, technology now offers a remarkable bridge. A new wave of acoustic researchers and software developers are using the impulse response data they've collected to create incredibly accurate virtual reality experiences and mobile applications. With a quality set of headphones, you can now take a virtual tour of the Hagia Sophia and hear a reconstruction of how a Byzantine chant would have sounded beneath its magnificent dome, complete with that unique 55 Hz resonance that vibrates in your chest. These digital recreations are more than just novelties. They are vital tools for preservation and global education, allowing people from all over the world to access and appreciate these auditory wonders. They democratize an experience that was once available only to a privileged few, ensuring that this intangible cultural heritage is not lost. Ultimately, engaging with these spaces mindfully, whether in person or through technology, is an act of deep respect. It shifts our perspective from seeing architecture as a static, visual art form to understanding it as a dynamic, multisensory instrument. When we take the time to truly listen, we stop being passive observers and become active participants in a conversation that has been ongoing for millennia. We connect with the artistry, the spirituality, and the sheer innovative genius of those silent architects, appreciating that they crafted these spaces not just for the eyes of God, but for the ears of humanity. This mindful engagement completes their work as the building's purpose is finally fulfilled in the experience of the listener. Imagine a concert hall where the very walls can listen and respond. A singer steps onto the stage, and as her voice rises in a quiet, devotional piece, subtle panels within the ceiling adjust their porosity, softening the room's reverberation to create an intimate, crystal-clear atmosphere. Then, as a full choir and organ join for a triumphant hymn, those same panels shift again, the architecture unlocking a deeper resonance that makes the sound swell with the grandeur of a Gothic cathedral. This is not a scene from science fiction. It is the very near future of sacred acoustics, where buildings are no longer static instruments but dynamic, responsive partners in ritual and meditation. We are entering an era where technology, from AI-driven acoustic modeling to nanomaterial science, offers us a palette of sonic possibilities our ancestors could scarcely dream of. We can now design spaces with digitally adjustable reverberation, where the same physical room can be tuned for the intricate clarity of a spoken sermon or the vast, enveloping wash of a choral performance at the touch of a button. We can 3D print complex, fractal-shaped diffusers that scatter sound with impossible precision, or use composite materials that are both structurally strong and acoustically tunable. The potential is staggering, offering architects the tools to craft perfect auditory environments for any purpose, in any tradition, with a level of control that borders on the magical. Yet for all this dazzling innovation, the most profound lesson from the past is that the soul of a sacred space cannot be manufactured by technology alone. The core principles discovered by ancient builders, those silent architects who worked with intuition, observation, and a deep reverence for the natural world, are not outdated. They are more relevant than ever. The timeless wisdom of harmonizing with a site's natural environment, of selecting materials for their inherent sonic personality, and of using sacred geometry to create proportional harmony. These are not primitive steps we have advanced beyond, but the enduring foundation upon which all meaningful acoustic design is built. A digitally rendered echo will always feel hollow if it is not grounded in the physical truth of stone, wood, and space. The warmth of aged timber, the cool resonance of stone, the way light and sound interact in a vaulted space, these are sensory experiences that speak to something ancient within us, something that a perfect digital simulation can acknowledge but never truly replace. The challenge and the opportunity for the next generation of architects is to wield these powerful new tools not to overpower nature, but to collaborate with it more deeply, to enhance the innate acoustic potential of a place rather than to impose an artificial soundscape upon it. This evolving fusion of ancient wisdom and cutting-edge technology points toward a thrilling new chapter in our relationship with sacred sound. We are learning to become true stewards of auditory experience, designing spaces that can adapt and evolve while remaining rooted in the eternal principles of harmony and intention. The future of sacred acoustics lies in this thoughtful blending, in creating spaces that honor the profound silence of a Zen garden while also embracing the potential for a dynamic, multi-faith hall that can acoustically transform to serve diverse communities. It ensures that the quest for awe and contemplation, so beautifully initiated by the master builders of old, will continue to find new expression. It proves that the architects of silence will never be silenced. Their legacy will simply find new voices, speaking through the materials and technologies of tomorrow, continuing their timeless work of crafting environments where the human spirit can listen and truly hear. From the whispering galleries of Renaissance domes to the resonant chambers of prehistoric tombs, the architects of silence have left us a legacy where sound and spirit intertwine in profound ways. Their work teaches us that sacred spaces are not just seen but heard, designed to elevate the human experience through acoustic mastery. These builders understood something we are only now fully rediscovering with our sophisticated instruments, that the space around us is not empty but filled with potential. They learned to sculpt that potential, to carve channels in the air where whispers could travel across centuries, and where silence could become a canvas for the divine. This was not merely engineering, it was a form of prayer rendered in stone and wood, a physical manifestation of humanity's deepest yearning to connect with something greater than itself. As we continue to study and preserve these wonders, we honor their vision of a world where architecture speaks to the soul. Every time an acoustic archaeoanthropologist maps the resonant frequencies of an ancient pyramid, or a conservationist carefully cleans a cathedral's stone to restore its original reflective voice, we are participating in a conversation that began millennia ago. We are learning to listen not just with our ears but with our hearts and our history, to the subtle harmonies they embedded into the very fabric of their buildings. This work ensures that future generations will not only gaze upon these structures in wonder, but will also be able to stand within them and feel the same awe, the same profound sense of connection that was so meticulously designed into every arch, every column, and every carefully calculated curve. Thank you for joining this journey into the hidden harmonies of history. We've wandered through underground necropolises where sound alters consciousness, stood in theaters where a pin drop becomes a public event, and marveled at cathedrals that turn human voices into angelic choirs. If you felt inspired by these silent architects, if this exploration has changed the way you hear the world around you, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your own experiences of powerful acoustic spaces and let us know which mysteries of the past you'd like to explore together next. For more journeys into the forgotten arts and hidden wisdom of our ancestors, be sure to